They say price is a signal, a reflection of supply and demand, of scarcity and abundance, of the invisible hand guiding the world toward balance. But what happens when the world's most powerful factory decides to break that signal? What happens when one nation becomes so large, so efficient, and so relentless at producing cheap goods that it drags down prices, wages, industries, and even entire countries with it? What happens when cheap stops being a bargain and becomes a trap? For decades, the global economy has quietly lived inside a system built on China's low-cost engine, an engine so big that it doesn't just participate in markets, it bends them. It doesn't just compete, it reshapes the rules others must obey. And right now, that system is reaching a breaking point. Because behind every unbelievably cheap product, there is a cost someone must pay. A factory worker, a competitor, a local industry, a rural town thousands of miles away, sometimes even an entire nation. And the bill, after being ignored for years, is finally coming due. This is the story of the China trap, how the world's greatest manufacturing miracle became a dangerous global imbalance, and why the very affordability that once fueled prosperity is now threatening to collapse the system it created. But to understand the trap, we have to go back to the beginning, to the moment China transformed from a closed, agrarian nation into the most powerful industrial force in human history. It didn't happen slowly. It didn't happen accidentally. It happened with intention, precision, and a blueprint no one else could replicate. Western consumers thought they were seeing discounts. Western corporations thought they were accessing a gold mine of low-cost labor. Governments thought they were entering a new era of global cooperation. But China was building something else entirely. Factories that could scale faster than competitors could respond. Supply chains so dense and interconnected that no individual company or even country could pull away without pain. A pricing strategy that undercut global rivals until they either exited the market or became dependent on Chinese production to survive. This wasn't competition. This was dominance disguised as affordability. And so, piece by piece, country by country, industry by industry, the world outsourced not just production but self-sufficiency. It traded resilience for convenience, independence for price cuts, long-term stability for short-term profit. And like all traps, it didn't feel like a trap at first. It felt like progress. Your shelves got cheaper. Your wages stretched further. Your favorite brands passed the savings on. Governments celebrated falling inflation. Corporations celebrated rising margins. Everyone felt richer until they were. Because there is a moment in every economic cycle when the true cost reveals itself. When the factories back home close. When the industries that once built national strength vanish. When the workers who depended on them can no longer compete. And when the system becomes so optimized, so efficient, so concentrated that it can no longer survive any disruption. That moment is now approaching. And it begins with a simple but unsettling truth. When everything becomes too cheap, nothing can afford to live. Factories don't collapse all at once, they fade. First the overtime disappears, then the shifts shrink, then the orders slow until one day the gates close and the machines fall silent. The workers scatter. The town that once pulsed with industry becomes quiet, then empty. This story has played out across the United States, Europe, Southeast Asia, South America, anywhere that once tried to compete with China and lost. But the truth is deeper than simple competition. These places didn't lose because they were inefficient or outdated. They lost because they were competing against something the modern world had never seen before. A nation willing to produce at prices so low, profits so thin, and scales so massive that no free market company could match it. And for a long time, the world welcomed this imbalance. Why not? Consumers got what they wanted, prices so low they seemed impossible. Governments got what they wanted, low inflation, rising living standards, a global economy. Corporations got what they wanted, predictable costs, high margins, and a supply chain that seemed infinite. China's factories became the beating heart of the global consumer era. But a heart can only pump faster for so long. Inside China, that low-cost model came with hidden pressures: rising wages, aging populations, declining domestic demand, collapsing real estate markets, and local governments addicted to debt just to keep the machine running. Outside China, the dependency grew so deep that nations could no longer live without the very system undermining them. If China slowed, inflation soared. If China closed ports, shelves went empty. If China raised prices even slightly, entire industries panicked. This is where the trap tightens. Because dependence is power. And in the global economy, power rarely goes unused. Over time, China didn't just manufacture goods, it manufactured leverage. Control over critical minerals. Control over solar panel production. Control over electronics assembly. Control over pharmaceutical precursors. Control over rare earths essential to military hardware. Control over the supply chains that make modern life possible. Not through coercion, but through price. The world took the bait because it was cheap. Cheap outcompetes ethics, policy, environmental standards, labor protections, even national security. When something becomes cheap enough, it becomes irresistible. But what is irresistible is often dangerous. Because price doesn't tell you the cost. It only tells you what the market is willing to pay. And for nearly 30 years, the market was willing to pay almost nothing for everything. This is how nations lose industries without declaring bankruptcy. This is how workers lose generational skills without noticing. This is how supply chains become fragile without showing cracks. And now, as China faces slowing growth, shrinking demand, and a desperate need to keep factories alive, it is pushing prices even lower, not to compete, but to survive. And when a nation that big races to the bottom, the whole world is pulled down with it. The question isn't whether China's cheapness will continue. The question is what happens when the world can no longer afford the consequences. There is a point in every economic cycle where prices stop being an advantage and start becoming a warning. Because when something is too cheap, it rarely means efficiency. It usually means desperation. And right now, China is exporting desperation at scale. Inside China, factories are running on thinner margins than ever recorded. Entire provinces depend on keeping production alive at any cost, because without it, unemployment would explode, local governments would collapse under debt, and the social stability built over decades could fracture. So Chinese producers do the only thing they can. They slash prices. They dump excess supply onto global markets. They flood the world with more goods than it can absorb. Solar panels priced below the cost of materials. Electric vehicles sold at losses for years. Steel at prices no competitor can match. Batteries, chemicals, electronics, all pushed out at speeds and volumes that defy economic gravity. This isn't strategy anymore. This is survival. But survival for China's factories means suffocation for everyone else. Countries from the US to India to Brazil to Vietnam now face the same impossible equation. Either accept the cheap Chinese imports and watch their industries collapse, or fight back and risk inflation, shortages, even geopolitical fallout. It's a lose-lose scenario, one created slowly, quietly, by decades of dependency. And here's the part that makes the trap nearly impossible to escape. China has scale no one can replicate. A supply chain ecosystem so dense that even if a company leaves, it still remains tethered to China for components. A workforce so large that even reduced demand still fills entire industrial districts. A logistics network so optimized that goods arrive faster and cheaper than most countries can even produce them. This is not a factory. It's an economic gravity well. And gravity is hard to escape. Western nations are scrambling to rebuild industries they abandoned decades ago, only to discover the skills are gone, the suppliers are gone, the expertise has vanished, and the costs are sky high. Rebuilding a semiconductor ecosystem takes 10 years. Rebuilding industrial machinery knowledge takes a generation. China did it in 3 decades. Others will take far longer to catch up. But the bigger danger is psychological, the illusion consumers have been conditioned to believe. Cheap is normal, cheap is good, cheap is progress. Except now, cheap is a warning sign. A signal that the world's largest manufacturing engine is cracking under pressure. A sign that the global economy has been running on prices that make no long-term sense. A sign that the world has built its living standards on an unsustainable imbalance. Because when goods are too cheap for competitors to survive, eventually even the producer cannot survive. And that's when the real crisis begins. Because the world did not just outsource manufacturing to China. It outsourced resilience. And resilience is not something you can buy back with discounts. There's a strange silence that falls over a market right before it breaks. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from numbers that don't add up, inventories that rise too fast, and prices that fall too low. China is entering that silence now. It begins with empty apartments, millions of them built on borrowed money, now sitting without buyers. Real estate once made up nearly 1/3 of China's economy. Today it is a sinkhole, pulling down growth, confidence, and local government finances all at once. When the property engine stalled, China needed another one. So it pushed everything into manufacturing. More factories, more supply, more exports, more production than the world could possibly consume. This strategy worked for a while until it didn't. Because global demand softened. Demographics weakened. Young Chinese consumers became cautious, saving instead of spending. And suddenly, China was producing too much for a world that wasn't buying enough. And so prices dropped. Then dropped again. Then dropped to levels economists once said were impossible. But ultra-low prices don't just distort markets, they rewrite them. Steel producers in Europe can't compete. Battery manufacturers in the US can't keep up. Solar companies in India shut down almost as quickly as they open. Developing countries, attempting to industrialize, watch their dreams collapse before they can begin. Whole industries vanish not because of inefficiency, but because they cannot survive in a world where China is willing to sell at a loss. And here is the dark irony. The very thing that made China powerful, its ability to outproduce, outscale, and underprice the world, is now pushing it toward a dead end. Because if you push prices too low for too long, you devalue the very industries you depend on. Factories overproduce. Profits evaporate. Jobs become unstable. Debt piles up. Innovation stalls. Capital flees to safer places. Young people lose faith in the future. And the world follows the same trajectory. Every country that relies on cheap imports becomes vulnerable to disruption. Every company that depends on Chinese suppliers becomes a hostage to price shocks. Every consumer who expects perpetual affordability becomes part of a system that cannot sustain itself. This is the global echo of China's internal crisis, a price war that no one can win, and no one can escape. It raises a chilling question the world has avoided for years. What happens when the factory of the world becomes too efficient for the world to survive? Because efficiency is only a virtue, until it becomes a threat. And right now, the threat is growing. The final stage of the China trap doesn't appear gradually. It arrives suddenly, when the world realizes that prices can't fall forever, and that stability cannot come from a system where survival depends on selling everything too cheaply to sustain it. The breaking point is closer than we think.